The night pressed heavy against the glass tower that bore Michael Wilson's name in steel letters. The kind of tower that shimmered even after sunset, defying the city's darkness. Inside, the day's final negotiations had drained him to the marrow. The gleam of polished floors, the quiet efficiency of assistants, and the ever-present hum of money moving in invisible lines across the world. It all seemed distant now as he stepped out into the open air. His suit, a pale blue that reflected the last glimmers of neon, was still immaculate, though his spirit beneath it was not. His chestnut hair had fallen slightly out of place, his blue eyes ringed with fatigue, yet sharper than most would dare to meet. He had spent the day wielding power and persuasion like weapons, and for once, all he wanted was the silence of his car, the leather seat embracing him as the city blurred past. The boulevard was alive with its nightly rhythm. Cars rolled in steady streams, their headlights washing over wet asphalt. Conversations drifted in fragments from couples and colleagues heading home. Vendors shouted half-heartedly, their carts glowing under weak bulbs. It was the soundtrack of a city too busy surviving to stop and breathe. Michael walked through it like a man detached from it all, his pace measured, his expression unreadable. He had lived long enough among glass walls and sealed boardrooms to feel insulated from the pulse of ordinary life. Tonight, however, something broke through. At first, it was nothing more than a note of sound, faint and nearly swallowed by the chaos. A cry, but not the sharp wail of a child denied a toy, not the impatient scream of a tantrum. This sound was smaller, weaker, as though every ounce of breath cost too much to waste. Michael slowed, the sound finding its way past the armor he wore. His eyes narrowed, scanning the shadows that clung to the edges of the boulevard. And then he saw them. Beneath a dim, sputtering street lamp, on the cold pavement where people barely spared a glance, sat a little girl. She could not have been more than 6. Her blonde hair hung loose and tangled around a pale face. Her features sharpened not by age, but by hunger and strain. Her eyes blue, too large for her small frame lifted toward him briefly before flicking down again. In her thin arms she cradled a bundle of pink, the small infant shifting restlessly within the blanket. Tiny fists punched the air, cheeks streaked with tears. The baby's cry soft and broken as if exhaustion had stolen its strength. Michael stopped, as though the city itself had thrown a chain across his chest. The girl rocked the infant gently, her lips moving, her voice a whisper he barely caught. Please, milk for my sister. The world around him kept moving. People walked by, shoulders stiff, eyes averted. A businessman quickened his steps. A young couple glanced for a heartbeat, then turned away, the man tightening his grip on the woman's hand as though pity was a contagion best avoided. Michael watched it happen, and each indifference struck him harder than any corporate defeat he had ever known. He had written checks before, hosted galas, signed off on donations that made headlines. But standing here now, those acts felt hollow. This was not a statistic in a report or a staged photograph in a charity newsletter. This was a child, a living contradiction of fragility and strength, clutching her sister with a determination that should never belong to someone her age. She did not cry for herself. Her eyes, though rimmed with fatigue, held something steadier, fiercer the refusal to let go, the refusal to break. Michael felt the air tighten in his throat. His mind flicked back, unbidden, to a hospital room long ago. The beeping of machines surrounding his mother's final hours. He had been young, too young to understand why the world would allow her to slip away, but old enough to remember the silence afterward. It had carved something into him, a wound he had hidden beneath layers of ambition and success. Tonight, that wound stirred. His shoes clicked against the pavement as he moved closer, his tall frame casting a long shadow under the flickering lamp. The girl stiffened, but did not flee. Instead, she pulled the infant tighter, as though daring him to try and take her away. Up close, Michael saw the hollow cheeks, the thin arms, the dirt smeared on her denim jacket. The baby's cries softened, as if even desperation had limits. He crouched down slowly, careful not to tower over her. Words, usually his greatest weapon, deserted him. He had delivered speeches that swayed governments, argued contracts that moved billions. Yet here he was, mute before a child. Finally, he found a voice, softer than he recognized. "Are you here alone?" She gave the smallest of nods, her chin lowering toward the baby's head. The motion nearly shattered him. A child caring for another child, invisible to the world, surviving on scraps of courage. For the first time in years, Michael Wilson did not think of profits or deadlines or deals waiting in his inbox. He thought only of the fragile heartbeat in the bundle of pink, the quiet strength in the girl's eyes, and a question pressing on him like a weight. Would he walk away like the others? Or was this the night that would break the silence he had built around his heart? Michael's knees ached slightly as he stayed crouched under the weak glow of the street lamp, staring into the little girl's eyes. For a man who commanded the attention of boardrooms filled with sharp-tongued investors, it was unsettling how a child's silence left him stripped of certainty. The girl blinked slowly, her lashes heavy, her small body trembling under the night air. The infant squirmed again in her arms, a pitiful sound breaking out, a cry not of noise, but of need. Michael's heart stuttered with it. "I can help you." He tried again, his voice quieter now, as though afraid a louder tone might shatter her fragile shell. But she didn't answer. Her arms tightened around the baby, her chin lowering protectively. In that gesture, Michael saw defiance, not rebellion, not arrogance, something older than either survival. For the briefest second, doubt struck him. He had heard of scams before, orchestrated performances on the streets designed to tug at wallets. Could this be one? Was someone lurking nearby, waiting for a wealthy man like him to fall into their trap? His mind, always trained to calculate risks, whispered caution. He glanced at the flow of people. A security guard leaned against the far corner of a closed shop, pretending not to notice. Two men in worn coats muttered to each other as they passed. Eyes flicking briefly toward the girl and then away, Michael forced himself to breathe. His instincts told him what logic tried to deny this was no scam. No rehearsed act could summon the raw desperation etched on the girl's face or the fading cries of the infant. He leaned in closer, lowering his voice. "What's your name?" The girl hesitated, her lips parting, but no sound emerging. Then, softly, almost lost to the city's noise, "Emily, and her?" Michael nodded gently toward the bundled dot. Emily shifted, brushing the baby's cheek with trembling fingers. Sophie, asterisk, the names hung in the air like fragile glass, delicate and beautiful. For Michael, they were anchors. No longer faceless children in the dark, they were Emily and Sophie, tethered to reality, tethered to him. He felt something shift inside, a crack in the walls he had built to keep the world's pain at bay. He opened his mouth to offer food, money, anything, but Emily's next words froze him. "I can't go home." It was whispered so faintly he almost thought he'd misheard. Michael frowned. "Why not?" Emily shook her head quickly, fear flickering across her features, and pulled Sophie tighter. The motion was instinctive, the way a soldier might grip his weapon in hostile territory. Michael's chest tightened. This wasn't just hunger. This was danger. Before he could press further, Sophie let out a strangled cough. The sound was small, but it hit Michael like thunder. The infant's tiny body arched briefly in Emily's arms, then slumped, her cry fading into a weak whimper. Panic spiked through Michael's veins. Emily's eyes widened, and for the first time, tears spilled down her cheeks. "No, no, no." She whispered frantically, rocking her sister. "Stay with me, Sophie, please." The city moved around them, indifferent. A woman in heels hurried by, deliberately turning her head. A taxi slowed at the corner, its driver glancing at the scene before pressing the gas again. Michael felt fury rise in his throat, not at Emily, not at Sophie, but at the world that could walk past such a moment. He stood abruptly, scanning the street for help, but no one met his eyes. His luxury sedan was parked at the edge of the block, gleaming under neon. It was the fastest way to safety. But Emily's small, trembling figure on the cold pavement stopped him from simply lifting her and walking away. He crouched again, his voice steady but urgent. "Emily, she needs help. I can take you both somewhere safe." Her head jerked in refusal. "No," she cried, louder now, and the sound drew a few irritated glances from passing strangers. "They'll take her away. They'll take her from me." Asterisk, her words slammed into him with unexpected weight. She wasn't afraid of him, she was afraid of losing Sophie. The fear was so sharp, so absolute, that Michael knew it came from experience. Someone had threatened to separate them before. His mind reeled. Who? Why? Sophie coughed again, weaker this time, and Emily broke, tears spilling faster as she tried to rock her back to calmness. Michael's decision crystallized in that instant. The same instinct that had once driven him to rescue his company from the brink of collapse, now burned with a different purpose. This wasn't about balance sheets or mergers. This was about two children who had no one. His voice came out firmer than before, layered with the authority of a man who was never told no. "Emily, I promise you no one will take her from you. Not while I'm here. Her watery eyes met his, searching. For the first time, something flickered in certain trust, and then, just beyond the glow of the street lamp, Michael thought he saw a movement, a shadow, lingering along. Watching, his instincts sharpened. Whoever it was didn't belong to the flow of the crowd. A chill crept over him. The night had just shifted, and Michael knew this wasn't only about hunger anymore. This was about survival, hers, the baby's, and maybe even his. Asterisk, the street lamp buzzed faintly above them, its light too weak to keep the darkness from pressing in. Michael's gaze kept shifting between Emily's tear-streaked face and the faint bundle in her arms. Sophie's cries had weakened further, her breaths uneven, and each fragile sound twisted something deep in him that no business deal ever could. He glanced toward the edge of the block again. The shadow he had noticed earlier was still there, a figure half hidden by the outline of a delivery truck. The man's face was obscured, but Michael knew enough about people to recognize when someone was watching. His instinct screamed at him. This wasn't coincidence. He leaned closer to Emily, keeping his voice calm, though every muscle in his body was tense. "We have to move, now." Emily shook her head violently, clutching Sophie tighter. "No, they'll find us." "Who?" Michael pressed, lowering his tone further. But the little girl only bit her lip and shook harder, refusing to answer. Fear had sealed her voice. Michael made a choice. He rose to his full height, his shadow falling across her small frame, and extended a hand. "Emily, if we stay here, Sophie won't last the night. You said she hasn't eaten all day. Trust me just long enough to get her safe for a heartbeat." The world seemed to hold its breath. The city's hum, the shuffle of feet, even the neon glow felt distant. Emily's eyes darted toward the dark corner where Michael had seen the figure, then back to his hand. Her lips trembled, caught between defiance and desperation. Sophie let out another faint cough, weaker this time. That broke the last of her resistance. With a trembling hand, Emily placed her tiny fingers in Michael's. Her grip was like a whisper, but it was enough. He lifted her gently, careful not to jostle Sophie, and carried them toward his sedan. The glossy black machine waited under the glow of the next lamp, sleek and imposing, a chariot out of place in the broken rhythm of the street. But as they approached, Michael's pulse quickened. He could feel the gaze still trailing them. He glanced over his shoulder once more, and his suspicion hardened into certainty. The figure had stepped out now, moving slowly, deliberately, as if testing the distance. Michael quickened his pace, pulling Emily closer against his chest. She buried her face against Sophie, whispering words only the infant could hear. Promises, Michael realized. Promises a child should never have to make. They reached the car, and Michael yanked the door open. The smell of leather and polished steel rushed out, the contrast so stark it almost felt cruel. Emily's eyes darted around, wide, uncertain. She shrank back for a second, clutching Sophie tighter. "It's okay," Michael said quickly, lowering his voice again. "This is just a car, safe, warm. No one can touch you here." Emily hesitated, then slid onto the seat, keeping Sophie tight in her lap. Michael circled to the driver's side, every nerve in his body alert. As he slid into the seat and started the engine, he caught sight of the figure again in the mirror. The man had stopped at the edge of the block, staring at the car as though memorizing it. Michael's jaw tightened. Whoever that was, he wasn't just passing through. The car pulled smoothly into the street, the engine humming low. Emily pressed herself against the door, her eyes darting between Michael and the window. "Where are we going?" she whispered. "To get milk first," Michael answered without hesitation. "Then a doctor for Sophie." Her breath caught. "Not a hospital. Please, not there." "Why not?" Her voice cracked. "They'll take her. They always try to take her from me." Michael's hands tightened on the wheel. This fear wasn't born of imagination, it came from experience. Something had already tried to pry Sophie away, and Emily had fought like a soldier twice her age to keep her. His chest ached with the injustice of it. He glanced at her again. Her face lit only by passing neon signs. She was so small, her jacket too thin, her arms too frail. Yet her grip on Sophie was unbreakable, fierce, as though she were holding the entire world in her lap. "Emily," Michael said carefully, "no one is going to take her. Not while I'm here. Do you understand me?" She looked at him, eyes wet, searching his face for cracks. For once in his life, Michael prayed she would see not the CEO, not the man who built an empire from steel and glass, but the boy who once lost his mother and swore he would never feel that helpless again. Before she could answer, headlights flared in the mirror. A dark sedan slipped into the lane behind them, keeping steady distance. Michael's pulse spiked. Coincidence, dash, or pursuit? He pressed the accelerator gently, weaving through the next turn. The car followed, Michael's knuckles whitened around the steering wheel. He had walked into a story far bigger than a hungry child on a street corner. He didn't know who Emily was running from, but as the other car's headlights glared brighter in the mirror, one truth burned clear in his mind. They weren't just after the father's debts. They wanted the girls, and Michael Wilson wasn't about to let them have them. Asterisk. The city lights blurred past as Michael steered the sedan through narrow streets, the night pressing closer with every passing block. His heart pounded against his ribs, but his face remained composed. Honed by years of corporate wars where panic was a weakness no one could afford to see. Behind him, the dark sedan clung like a shadow, its headlights too steady, too deliberate. Emily sat rigid in the passenger seat, Sophie clutched against her chest. The infant whimpered softly, her tiny breath still uneven, and Emily rocked her without thought, her lips brushing the baby's forehead in rhythm. But her eyes never left the window. She was watching too. She knew. Michael pressed down on the accelerator as they turned onto a busier street, merging into traffic. Neon signs bathed the car in flickering colors, the hum of nightlife surrounding them. For a moment, he hoped the crowd of vehicles might break the tail. But when he checked the mirror again, the dark sedan had matched his every move, slipping effortlessly through the lanes like a predator stalking prey. "Emily," Michael said, his voice low but steady, "do you know who they are?" Her grip on Sophie tightened, her small knuckles paling. She didn't answer right away. Instead, her lips moved in a whisper, words meant only for the baby. "Don't be scared, Sophie." "I won't let them." Michael's throat tightened. He recognized the tone not of a child, but of someone who had been forced to grow up too fast. Someone carrying a weight that should have broken her already. "Emily," he repeated, more gently this time, "I need to know. If I'm going to keep you both safe, I have to understand what we're up against." Her eyes darted to his face, searching, measuring. Finally, she whispered, "They want money. They said Daddy owed them." Her voice cracked on the word daddy. "But he's gone. He left before Mom got sick. He never came back." Michael felt a chill deeper than the night air. So it was true, their father had left them with debts and danger. And now, the children bore the punishment of his choices. The sedan behind them surged closer. Michael took a sudden turn onto a side street, tires screeching faintly against the asphalt. Emily gasped, clutching Sophie tighter as the baby stirred. Michael's chest tightened. Every decision he made tonight wasn't just about himself, it was about the fragile lives in his care. The road narrowed, leading into an industrial block where old warehouses loomed like sleeping giants. The streets were quieter here, shadows deeper. Michael cursed under his breath. He traded neon crowds for isolation. In the mirror, the dark sedan followed, closing in. Sophie coughed again, a sharp sound that cut through the tension like glass. Emily's panic burst through her thin walls. "Please," she begged, her voice breaking, "don't let them take us. They said they'd take Sophie if I didn't give them money. I can't lose her." Michael's hands tightened on the wheel. He had built an empire with ruthless precision, faced billion-dollar collapses without blinking. But nothing had ever ignited his blood like this. "No one," he said through clenched teeth, "is taking her. Not while I'm breathing." Up ahead, a traffic light turned red. Michael considered braking, but something instinct screamed no. The dark sedan gained speed behind them, its headlights glaring bright. Too eager, a trap. If he stopped, they'd box him in. He pressed the accelerator and shot through the intersection, horns blaring as other cars swerved. Emily let out a small cry, but Michael kept the car steady, weaving through with controlled precision. Behind them, the sedan followed, barely a beat behind. Michael's mind raced. He could call the police, but how long before they arrived? And what would Emily do if strangers tried to pull Sophie from her arms under the guise of safety? She already didn't trust the system. He couldn't risk breaking her fragile trust now. The warehouses loomed larger, their walls graffiti-streaked and windows shattered. Michael veered down a side alley, the sedan still in pursuit. For a moment, the space tightened, brick walls pressing close, the echo of engines magnified. Emily clutched Sophie, her eyes wide, her voice breaking into raw truth. "You don't understand. If they catch us, they won't stop. Daddy told them about me. He said I was worth more than money." Michael's stomach dropped. The pieces clicked together in an instant. This wasn't just about debts. Her father hadn't only left them, he had sold them. Rage unlike anything he had known surged through him. The betrayal of a parent selling his own children was more monstrous than any corporate crime. He looked at Emily, at the sheer terror in her eyes, and something inside him hardened into steel. The alley opened suddenly into another main road. Michael swung the car wide, tires squealing, merging back into the rush of traffic. The pursuing sedan hesitated, its driver caught off guard. Michael used the moment, weaving quickly between cars until the headlights disappeared into the blur of the city. For the first time in minutes, he slowed. His chest heaved, his palms slick against the wheel. Emily still clutched Sophie tightly, her breath ragged, her face streaked with tears. But her eyes, when they turned to him, held something new. Not trust, not yet, but a flicker of belief, a possibility. Michael knew then that the battle wasn't over. Whoever they were, they wouldn't stop. But neither would he. Tonight had already rewritten everything he thought he knew about responsibility. He had walked out of his tower to escape numbers and negotiations, only to find a fight that mattered more than any empire he'd built, and for the first time in years, Michael Wilson was ready to fight for something worth losing everything for. Michael's car slid to a halt outside a low-lit clinic tucked between the shuttered shops. It wasn't the kind of polished hospital his peers would have used, but it was close and open. He killed the engine and glanced at Emily, who clutched Sophie as if the world would rip her away if she loosened her grip for even a second. "Emily," he said softly, his voice steadier than he felt, "we need to get her checked. Just for tonight. I'll stay with you. No one will take her from you." Her wide eyes searched his face. "You promise?" Her voice cracked, barely audible over Sophie's faint whimpers. Michael leaned forward, lowering his tone until it was more vow than reassurance. "On my mother's life, Emily, I promise." That was enough. Her trembling hands didn't release Sophie, but she gave the smallest nod. Together they stepped into the clinic, the warm hum of fluorescent lights washing over them, antiseptic sharp in the air. The receptionist barely glanced up from her desk until she saw the sight of 6-year-old clutching a pale, wheezing infant, standing beside a man in a suit worth more than her annual salary. Her eyes widened, and within seconds, a nurse rushed forward, ushering them into a small examination room. Emily froze at the threshold. "I stay with her," she demanded, her tiny chin lifted with stubborn fire. Michael placed a calming hand on her shoulder. "Of course. You're not leaving her." The nurse guided them to a bed where Sophie was gently lifted, checked with soft hands and practiced eyes. Emily hovered at the edge, ready to fight if anyone pulled too far. Michael stood beside her, a silent wall between her and the world. "She's malnourished," the nurse murmured, checking vitals. "Dehydrated too, but she's stronger than she looks." She offered a faint smile before hurrying off for supplies. Emily let out a breath that came out like a sob, quickly pressing her sleeve to her eyes. Michael watched, feeling something fractured deeper inside him. This wasn't a child crying for herself, this was a child holding the weight of another life, something no one should bear at 6 years old. He crouched to her level. "You did everything you could for her, Emily. You kept her alive. That's more than most grown-ups would manage." Her eyes flickered to his, glassy and uncertain. She swallowed. "But what if they find us here?" The words hit him like a blade. They weren't just ghosts in her mind, their pursuers were real, close, and relentless. Michael straightened, his instincts kicking in. He had built his fortune by anticipating moves before they came, by seeing the game 3 steps ahead. Now that skill wasn't about profits, it was about survival. He moved to the blinds, peeking through the slats at the street outside. For the moment, it was quiet, but quiet could be deceptive. Behind him, Emily sat on the bed's edge. Sophie nestled against her chest again after the nurse finished. She hummed softly, a broken little tune, rocking her sister as though the song alone could keep danger at bay. Michael's chest tightened with something unfamiliar, protectiveness that felt deeper than obligation, almost primal. The doctor entered, clipboard in hand, offering calm reassurances. But Michael's attention snapped back to the window when a black sedan slowed outside. The same model, the same lurking presence. His pulse jumped. He turned sharply. "Emily, we may have to leave soon." Her small hands tightened around Sophie. "But she needs the doctor." "I know," Michael said, his voice taut with urgency. "But they found us, and they won't wait." As if on cue, the clinic door swung open. A nurse hurried to the reception desk, startled, her voice raised as she asked, "Can I help you?" "Sir?" Michael couldn't see the man's face, but he heard the tone smooth, calm, rehearsed. "I'm here to check on my nieces, a little girl and a baby. Their father sent me." Emily stiffened, her entire body locking. The color drained from her face as she whispered, "It's them." Michael felt fire surge through him, a rage that startled even himself. He turned back to Emily, kneeling so their eyes were level. "Do you trust me?" She hesitated, trembling. Then, slowly, she nodded. Double quotes, then hold Sophie tight. He said, his jaw like stone, "We're leaving, and I'm not letting them touch you." He stood, his silhouette filling the small room, the same way it once had filled boardrooms where empires trembled at his decisions. Only this time, there were no profits, no contracts, no stakes he could measure on paper. This was flesh and blood, to fragile lives, and he had already decided he would risk everything to keep them safe. The footsteps in the hallway grew closer. Michael positioned himself between the door and the bed, every line of his body taut with purpose. For the first time in years, Michael Wilson wasn't the CEO behind the glass tower. He was something more dangerous. A man with nothing to lose when it came to protecting the children fate had placed in his path. The doorknob turned dot, and the night's battle truly began. The doorknob twisted slowly, as though whoever stood outside wanted to savor the tension. Michael's pulse hammered in his ears, but his stance was steady, his tall frame planted squarely in front of Emily and Sophie. Behind him, Emily tightened her grip on the baby, her breath shallow. Her eyes locked on the door with the kind of terror that told Michael she'd seen this before. The door cracked open. A man stepped in, his silhouette cutting the clean line in the fluorescent light of the hallway. He was well-dressed, his suit dark, his shoes polished. But there was something wrong, something off in the coldness of his smile. His eyes flicked over Michael briefly before settling on Emily. "There you are," the man said smoothly, his voice coated with false warmth. "Your uncle's been worried sick. Come now. Your father sent me to bring you home." Michael's jaw tightened. Uncle, father, lies, dressed up as family. He stepped forward just enough to block the man's view of the bed. "You've made a mistake," Michael said evenly, his voice calm, but edged with steel. "They're not going anywhere with you." The man's smile thinned. "And who are you?" Michael let the silence hang just long enough before answering. "The one standing in your way." The man's eyes narrowed. The air in the room thickened, tension sharp as glass. Michael recognized the look he had seen it across negotiation tables with deals turned ruthless. But here, the stakes weren't contracts. They were lives. Behind him, Emily's small voice broke the silence. "He's lying. He's not my uncle." The man's gaze snapped back to her, and his mask cracked for a fraction of a second. A sneer flickered before he smoothed it over. "Children get confused. She doesn't know what she's saying." Michael's blood boiled. He had built his empire on reading people, dissecting every flicker of expression. This man wasn't here to protect. He was here to take. He took one step closer, his voice low, dangerous. "Leave. Now, before I make you regret walking through that door." The man's smile faltered. For a heartbeat, the silence was absolute. Then, he gave a small laugh, but it was brittle, hollow. "Do you know who you're dealing with?" Michael's eyes turned cold. "Do you?" The man's posture shifted subtly, signaling retreat, but not defeat. He stepped back toward the door, his gaze lingering on Emily with a predator's patience. "This isn't over," he said softly. "The debts of the father always come due. You can't hide her forever." He left as quietly as he'd entered, the door clicking shut behind him. But the echo of his words lingered in the sterile air like a curse. Emily clutched Sophie tighter, her small shoulders shaking. Michael turned immediately, kneeling to her level. "Listen to me," he said firmly, his hand hovering near hers, but not touching until she allowed it. "He will not take you. Not while I'm here. Do you believe me?" Her lips trembled, but she whispered, "Daddy, he owed them. He told them. He told them I'd be worth something if he couldn't pay." The confession hit Michael like a physical blow. The enormity of it, the betrayal of a father selling his own child, burned through him. With white-hot fury, he forced himself to steady his voice. "Emily, look at me. You are not something to be sold. You are not a debt. You are a child. And you are safe now." Her tear-filled eyes searched his face, desperate for truth. For the first time, she nodded slowly. Michael rose, his decision already carved into him like stone. He pulled out his phone, dialing the secure number only a few people in his empire knew. When the line clicked, He spoke with the authority of a man who had commanded nations through commerce. "This is Wilson. I need a trusted man at Eastside Clinic. A marked vehicle. 10 minutes. No questions." He ended the call and turned back to Emily. "We're leaving here soon, but not into their hands. Into mine. Do you understand?" She nodded again, clutching Sophie tighter, and Michael felt something shift in, unspoken bond forming. Fragile, but real. The doctor returned briefly to check on Sophie, her vitals improving slightly with fluids and formula. Michael stood guard the entire time, his presence a shield. He could feel Emily's eyes on him, weighing, testing, but no longer doubting entirely. Outside, through the blinds, headlights flickered, another dark sedan circling slowly, waiting. The clinic had become a cage, and Michael knew cages were made to be broken. He leaned down once more to Emily, his voice steady as iron. "Tonight, you leave with me, and no matter what it takes, no one will ever lay a hand on you or your sister again." Emily's small hand, trembling but deliberate, reached out and gripped his sleeve. It wasn't full trust. Not yet, but it was enough. Michael Wilson, billionaire CEO, had just crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. He wasn't rescuing them for a night. He was taking responsibility for their lives. And the men outside the clinic were about to learn what it meant to stand against him. Asterisk, the night outside the clinic was restless. The hum of distant traffic broken only by the low idle of engines waiting where they shouldn't be. Michael stood at the window, his reflection staring back at him in the glass-sharp blue eyes. Chestnut hair tousled, suit still pristine despite the chaos. But he didn't recognize the man staring back. The CEO who had once measured life in profits and losses was gone. In his place stood someone rawer, someone more dangerous, someone who had finally found a fight worth bleeding for. Behind him, Emily sat on the bed, cradling Sophie against her chest. The baby's breathing had steadied after the fluids, her tiny body nestled beneath the pink blanket. Emily rocked her slowly, her pale face streaked with exhaustion, yet her eyes, those oversized, haunted eyes, remained open, alert. She didn't trust the silence. Neither did Michael. His phone buzzed once. A coded signal. His men were outside, waiting. But so were the pursuers. The clinic had become a glass box, and sooner or later, someone would shatter it. Michael turned back to Emily. "We're leaving now." Her small fingers clutched the blanket tighter. "They're outside," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Yes," Michael said evenly. "And they're not expecting me." She looked up at him, her eyes wide. "What do you mean?" He crouched down, lowering his voice until it was a vow. "Emily, I didn't build my life by waiting for people to come for me. I've fought men more ruthless than those out there, and I've won. Tonight, I fight for you." Her breath hitched. For the first time, she didn't look like a cornered child. For the first time, she looked like she wanted to believe. The sound came, then a knock, firm, deliberate, the kind of knock that wasn't asking permission. Michael straightened. His men wouldn't knock. This was them. The door cracked open, and the same man from before stepped inside, flanked by another. His smile was thinner now, his patience gone. "Mr. Wilson," he said smoothly, addressing him by name this time. "You're making this harder than it has to be. Hand over the girl and the baby. Walk away. No one touches you." Michael let the silence stretch. Then he smiled, but it wasn't the smile of a businessman. It was the smile of a man who had already chosen war. "Do you know who I am?" The man's expression faltered just slightly. Michael stepped closer, his presence filling the room. "I am Michael Wilson. Everything in this city with value runs through me. Money, contracts, influence, you breathe because I allow it. And tonight, I'm telling you, touch one hair on those girls, and you will lose more than your debts. You will lose everything." The second man shifted uneasily. The first narrowed his eyes. "Brave words. But debts don't vanish, Mr. Wilson. Their father owed us, and debts passed down." Michael's fury burned hot. He turned sharply to Emily, who shrank back at the mention of her father. "Is that true? Did your father?" Emily's lips trembled. Tears welled, but she forced the words out. He said if he couldn't pay, they could take me." He laughed. "He said Sophie was too small, but I was enough." The world tilted for Michael. His stomach knotted. Betrayal, not just abandonment. Her father had sold her like a commodity. The man smirked, sensing Michael's rage. "You see, it's simple. A father's word is binding." Michael's hand clenched into a fist. His mother's face flashed in his memory, the woman who had sacrificed everything for him, who had whispered in her last breath that he was meant for more than greed. And here stood a man claiming the child was nothing but a ledger entry. No, Michael said coldly, stepping forward until he was inches away. A father's word is binding, yes. So hear mine. I claim them. Emily and Sophie. From this night forward, they are mine, and I don't break my word. The man's eyes widened. He hadn't expected that. Emily gasped softly, clutching Sophie tighter, her gaze darting between them. Before the intruder could reply, the hallway erupted with movement. Michael's men swept in, silent and efficient, pinning the two strangers against the wall with practiced ease. One of them leaned into Michael. Orders? Michael's eyes were ice. Send them back with a message. Debts may pass down, but so does protection. And these girls belong to me now. The men nodded, dragging the struggling intruders out into the night. Silence returned, thick and heavy. Michael turned back to Emily. She stared at him, her mouth slightly open, tears streaking her cheeks. You mean it? She whispered. Michael knelt before her, lowering his gaze until it met hers directly. Emily, I can't bring your mother back. I can't erase what your father did. But I can promise you this: you will never beg again. You will never fear being taken. You and Sophie are safe. With me. Her small hand trembled as it reached out, gripping his sleeve. She didn't speak, but her eyes blue, weary, yet burning with something new. Said enough. Trust. Sophie stirred, letting out a small sigh, her tiny fist uncurling against Emily's chest. The baby slept, and for the first time that night, so did Emily's fear. Michael rose, lifting both sisters into his arms as though they weighed nothing. He carried them out of the clinic, past the broken shadows of men who had tried to claim them. Into the waiting car, the city loomed ahead, vast and uncaring. But Michael no longer saw glass towers or contracts. He saw the future small, fragile, but worth more than his empire. As the car pulled away, Emily whispered a single word into the quiet night. Dad. Michael closed his eyes, the word searing through him like fire and salvation all at once. The millionaire CEO had entered the night as a man defined by wealth. He left it defined by something far greater, a father.